through Windsor Castle over the...
cut the value of their currency in a realignment of the exchange rate mechanism. And Buckingham Palace says an enormous stroke of luck stopped the damage to Windsor Castle being much worse. Good evening. Foreign exchange dealers are preparing for a turbulent day on the currency markets tomorrow after a weekend devaluation of the Spanish peseta and the Portuguese escudo. Both currencies were marked down 6% in a realignment of the European exchange rate mechanism. The Irish and Danish currencies are likely to be the speculators' next targets. Analysts say the pound could also come under pressure, even though it's been out of the ERM since Black Wednesday.
Scrambling for details of the devaluations. Financial news agencies eager to send urgent reports to their subscribers around the world. The investors whose speculation has caused turmoil in the currency markets. As they departed, members of the EC's Monetary Committee denied the exchange rate mechanism's credibility is now in doubt. They agreed during 10 hours of talks to devalue the Spanish peseta and Portuguese escudo. Further evidence of what John Major describes as the serious fault lines in the system. Portugal's representative hoped the mass selling of weaker currencies would now stop.
We would expect that these pressures will die down now that there's been a realignment of the grid.
At the Brussels meeting, all were aware the ERM is meant to provide stability on the foreign exchanges, flexible enough, though, to ensure controlled devaluations. But here there's recognition speculators rather than monetary officials are dictating events. The Germans left knowing their country's high interest rates are causing the problems, making the Deutschmark more attractive to international investors. The Bundesbank's vice president was enigmatic when asked whether he'd reduce rates.
You can be sure that Germany will do what it feels is appropriate.
The Bundesbank is indicating it has little room to lower interest rates yet, though. It's anxious to send a signal to German unions before their winter pay round that tight control is needed to beat the country's rising inflation. Britain's senior EC commissioner accepts the German position is causing difficulties for others.
Obviously, German currency, with German interest rates being what they are, is much stronger than the others, and that has caused problems. It's caused problems for Britain, it's caused problems for France, which were overcome, and now it's caused problems for countries such as Spain and Portugal.
On the foreign exchanges, though, there may be more turmoil tomorrow. Dealers believe two other relatively weak currencies could be the speculators' targets. The Irish pound and the Danish kroner weren't devalued over the weekend, but they are in some difficulty. As they leave, members of the EC's Monetary Committee believe privately further realignments can't be ruled out. Jonathan Charles, BBC News, Brussels.
Here, the Treasury said it couldn't comment on what happens to other currencies, but a senior Tory said the realignments indicate the continuing lack of stability in the ERM. Labour says it proves their view that realignments within the ERM are possible.
As the final preparations are made for this week's conference of European central bankers, which will focus on the prospects for a single currency amidst the latest ERM upheavals, a government loyalist who's no great ERM enthusiast highlighted a perceived flaw in the system which had to be addressed before there was any chance of it functioning effectively.
Clearly there is not stability. There are still great pressures on the German economy, which, with the Deutschmark as the anchor currency, mean that being linked to that would continue instability for other members.
According to Labour sources, party leaders before the last election had drawn up confidential plans for a general realignment within the ERM, which they were going to propose within weeks of the British presidency, had they been in power. Now they argue that the weekend's events demonstrate the government missed an opportunity.
Well, what we've always argued is that there's got to be management of the exchange rate within Europe. What we wanted to see, first of all, was tougher action taken against speculators, and we were prepared to discuss with our European partners common measures to expand the European economies.
Anti-Maastricht conservatives, who are currently assessing ways of ambushing the treaty when it moves into the Commons Committee stage, claim that the monetary instability means the ERM and the treaty are doomed.
Well, it's certainly another nail in the coffin of the Maastricht Treaty, and I think what this proves beyond any doubt is the futility of governments and politicians trying to control events and circumstances which are much more powerful and bigger than they are.
One strongly pro-Maastricht minister told me that the only conclusion to be drawn from the weekend's devaluations is that the timetable for a single currency is over-ambitious and that Britain was right to negotiate an opt-out. But the current uncertainties over the ERM, the Maastricht Treaty and the World Trade Talks provide an unpromising background for John Major as he prepares for the Edinburgh Summit in under 3 weeks' time.
The government's promise to pay for the restoration of Windsor Castle has been challenged by the Labour MP Alan Williams, who sits on the Commons Public Accounts Committee. He wants the Queen to make a substantial contribution to the costs. The Heritage Secretary Peter Brook is expected to make a statement to the Commons tomorrow about the restoration and rebuilding work.
At first light this morning, as the night shift headed for home, their colleagues were beginning a day of damage assessment. The fire crews joined during the morning by troops from the Household Cavalry, a spokesman saying the aim was for an ordered and structured effort. Press reports that Windsor Castle's own fire brigade had been scaled down before the blaze to save money were briskly denied. In fact, it was claimed the Castle service had been upgraded to deal with both firefighting and salvage.
The basic recommendation of the Castle crew being salvage experts rather than firefighters as a first role has proved its worth here, because the amount of artifacts and treasures that have been removed has been, in my opinion, 100% successful.
The latest royal visitor to inspect the damage was Prince Edward. For the Prince, as for the rest of his family, it will have been a depressing experience. He was lifted above one of the most devastated areas, St George's Hall, whose roof no longer exists. But even as the Prince was surveying the scene, politicians were beginning the debate about who should pay for the rebuilding work. One Labour member of the Public Accounts Committee saying the government had been too hasty in pledging taxpayers' money.
If the royal family were paying taxes like everyone else, much of the pressure would disappear. But my suspicion is that the public mood at the moment is that it's wrong that we, the taxpayers, should be picking up the tab for every penny of this.
Windsor Castle is part of our national heritage. It's a national asset and it belongs to the state. It doesn't belong to Her Majesty. And because it's not insured, and because it belongs to the state, I think that the state should pay for its repair.
This afternoon, some of the paintings rescued from the blaze were being returned to Windsor Castle. It'll take days before everything is accounted for, and only then will the true cost be known.
The RUC have named a man found shot dead in Londonderry in the early hours of this morning. Gerry Holmes was kidnapped by the IRA last Tuesday. They claim he'd been an informer for British intelligence for 11 years.
4 days after he went missing, the body of John Gerard Holmes was found dumped in an alleyway on the Cregan housing estate. He'd been shot through the head. Local residents said they heard 2 bursts of gunfire. The IRA said they killed him, claiming he'd been an informer for more than a decade, although they said he was not a member of their organisation. The security forces followed normal practice and made no comment about the allegations. The local priest, though, spoke of the harrowing sights he'd witnessed.
It was really horrible. When we went up there, first of all, there were children screaming and in hysterics at the sight of a man lying dead on their own street. The people were shocked and were saying, why this, why us, why this poor man? To me, it's just evil.
It's the 7th terrorist murder since last Saturday. In Northern Ireland, the week has ended as it started, with killings and funerals and no sign of the new level of violence diminishing.
The 2 British men who were among 7 skiers killed in an avalanche in France yesterday have been named. They were Roderick Arkle from Tyne and Wear and Christopher Maxwell from Bristol. They were studying at the University of Lyon. The avalanche struck Val Thorens in the Savoy region, burying the 7 skiers and injuring another 20 people.
The avalanche engulfed the party while they were on one of the main ski runs above the resort. For the first time in years, there'd been an abnormally heavy fall of snow, 1 metre in less than 2 days. The authorities cleared much of the dangerous accumulations with dynamite in the days before the accident. They then thought that things were safe.
All the time, every morning, everyone involved here takes the necessary precautions, especially when there's a danger of an avalanche.
3 of the student party escaped with only minor injuries. The bodies of the others, including a 10-year-old child and an Australian, were taken to a local chapel. The resort was closed for the day as a mark of respect. Government officials from the region say that there'll be a judicial inquiry into the whole incident.
Storms and tornadoes in the United States have left at least 16 people dead and caused damage worth millions of dollars. The tornadoes swept through the southern states of Mississippi, Tennessee and Alabama. The storm struck in the early hours of this morning and caught most people asleep. Many of those affected were living in caravans and mobile homes. 3 children are among the dead. One man described 2-story houses being reduced to no more than firewood. Roads were blocked and electricity cut off as the strong winds swept eastwards across southern America. NATO warships in the Adriatic have begun to enforce the United Nations blockade against the Serbs and their allies in the former Yugoslavia. 12 ships are patrolling the area. A Serbian offensive is underway against Muslim and Croat fighters defending the Bosnian town of Travnik. The World Health Organization has confirmed cases of typhoid in the town and the surrounding area. British troops from the UN force based at Vitez are helping to supply food and medicine to civilians trapped in Travnik.
It's a massive operation which is running the risk of either joining in the war or being defeated by its complexity. There are now several thousand UN troops who find themselves like fully armed referees in a match when neither side believes in rules. The UN headquarters in Bosnia exudes a busy military air, but on key issues, such as the UN's behavior in the face of the Serbian advance, there is no clear answer.
My hope is that it will not happen. And if it's happened, please be confident that we will not remain passive. That's all that I can tell you.
The general speaks in diplomatic terms. The UN mandate limits his options. And up the valley, the British are dealing with reality. The towns they're delivering aid to are under fire. So today the warriors trundle through one such town and stop just short of the front line. One of the intentions of this kind of action is perhaps to calm things down in the area. The very presence of these large fighting vehicles in UN colours, perhaps giving the Serbs pause for thought. Perhaps, but not yet. At least the British were not fired at directly today. Optimism and faith in negotiation are the main weapons carried by this UN force at the moment. They may not be enough. Kate Adey, BBC News, Travnik.
Here, the government has dismissed new allegations from Labour in the arms to Iraq controversy as sensationalism. The Shadow Trade Secretary Robin Cook says arms equipment was sold on credit and the British taxpayer will have to pay the bill. The Commons debates the affair tomorrow. Opinion polls in Ireland's general election campaign suggest the ruling Fianna Fail party of the Prime Minister Albert Reynolds may be losing ground. The polls point to an increase in support for the minority Labour Party led by Dick Spring. The election is on Wednesday.
Albert Reynolds' sole target since he became Taoiseach, Irish Prime Minister, is an overall majority. But according to the opinion polls, he's leading Ireland's largest party to its worst election showing in decades. And while he might lead another coalition government, it's entirely possible the party will end up in opposition to a so-called rainbow grouping of 3 or more smaller parties. Mr. Reynolds calls that a lethal cocktail.
People's minds will be focused this weekend on certainty and stability. I don't think they'll buy instability and uncertainty very easily because of the problems that are out there, not alone domestically but internationally as well. We need strong and stable government to confront the international currency crisis that's beginning to reappear again.
Canvassing at the church gate after Mass is a tradition as old as Irish politics, and religious belief is involved on polling day. The referendum on abortion is being held at the same time. But perhaps the totally unexpected surge in the election by Labour and its leader Dick Spring means there has been a change in Irish attitudes. From nowhere, he's far and away the most popular choice for Prime Minister in the opinion polls, though his party's unlikely even to be second biggest. His solution? Alternate the premiership.
If we're going to share the responsibility, and there's going to be a lot of responsibility for very difficult economic times in this country, then I believe the best way to establish the trust and the mutual respect is by sharing the leadership to tackle the problems.
Albert Reynolds Fianna Fail was the last party to hold an overall majority 11 years ago. It's another close election, and single-party government in Ireland may be gone forever. Dennis Murray, BBC News, County Leitrim.
That's it. That's all from the newsroom this weekend. Good night.
Tomorrow night, as MPs and the public demand to know the truth about arms for Iraq, Panorama, which revealed 2 years ago how British companies were helping arm Saddam, will tell the inside story. With secret papers, we reveal who in the government knew what and when, and we talk to the man who ended up in the dock, though he was spying for British intelligence.
I believe that what information I was given to them was also being passed on to the other government departments.
That's UK Limited, The Arming of Iraq, Panorama 9:30 on BBC1.
Good evening. The avalanche risk is still there in the Alps, with temperatures above zero right up to 2,500 metres, or about 8,000 feet. It's a dome of mild and moist air that's been pushing in towards the British Isles, and it's been over Spain and France for a day or so. Zooming into our own country, this darker cloud further north shows where it is still raining, and that rain has actually moved north over the last few hours, and the heaviest is now lying over Scotland, in fact going outside our radar range. That's the chart for midnight. The big difference between the bulk of Europe and ourselves is the strong southwesterly gradient. That's bringing in mild, moist and therefore rather wet air. The wind's quite strong, up to gale force, certainly up the western side and in the north, but pretty stiff over the whole country. Despite that though, even though there's a lot of strong winds around, it won't feel that cold. We're up to double figures in most of the country, and eventually even northern Scotland, well, we'll be joined there by double figures. So tonight then fairly wet, the heaviest rain moving away, but cloud everywhere, mist, even fog on the higher ground. And that's the way it starts tomorrow, very dull, especially in the west, with more drizzle than rain, I suspect, but that can amount to a lot of rain. Brighter weather possibly in the southeast later on in the day, and coming into the west as well, in Northern Ireland. It'll take a while to cross the whole country, if it ever does before daylight. Another mild day.
An open space special on BBC2 in 15 minutes follows aspiring Basildon recording artist